Hi, this is the first short lecture on Chapter 3. Chapter 3 focuses on a foundational component of poetry, words. Before we can look at what else a poem might say or might mean, we really need to understand what it's saying on a literal level. And only then can we go on to ask if the poem suggests anything else. So I've put a few definitions up here. They're not all of the definitions from the chapter, but they'll be the most important for considering the sample poem I've selected. First, we need to be clear about what diction means. And it's really simple. It's just word choice. It's the vocabulary in the poem. Then we want to ask, is the poet using concrete or abstract diction? And that will tell us a little more about the poet's goals with the poem. And then we want to look at levels of diction. Is this elevated, poetic diction? Is it colloquial or casual, informal diction? Or is it a literate yet still ordinary word choice for educated native speakers? The sample poem I've picked is by William Carlos Williams. This is just to say. This is just to say. I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. Now, Williams, in the title, gestures toward the literal meaning of this poem, and actually that there may not be any other meaning to this poem when he gives us a title that says, this is just to say. In other words, this is it, there isn't anything else. But just to be sure, we want to take a look at the diction. Clearly, he's using concrete diction. He has clear, concrete imagery, the plums, the icebox. It's not abstract. It's colloquial diction, and I say that primarily because of the word icebox. He had a choice at this time. This poem is from 1934, and both the word icebox and the word refrigerator were in use, and he chose the more common word. It's possible that the grammatical structure of the poem leans a little more toward general English, but in terms of word choice, this is an example of colloquial diction. One of the ways to get a better sense of the work a poet is asking particular words to do is to use a dictionary and find out more about those words. We have access to an amazing dictionary through the library's website. It's called the Oxford English Dictionary, or the OED. And so what I did was I dropped in the word icebox into the OED, and this dictionary will show us how to pronounce a word, the etymology of the word, what languages it came from, how it was formed. It will give us usually multiple definitions of the word. In this case, there are two, and the one that we're most interested in is icebox as a place to keep things cool, in other words, a refrigerator. And then the OED shows us when the word first appeared in print, and it traces later appearances of that word in print. And what was important to me looking at this was here its usage in 1921. Williams writes this in 1934, so we know this is probably still in use. And then, just out of interest, I also dropped in the word refrigerator. And in this case, the OED gave me 3 different definitions, and it lets me know that this earlier one is now rare. First shows up in 1611. We can go down here to see one connected to chemistry and brewing. And then the one we're most interested in, again, an icebox, a refrigerator, a place to keep perishable things preserved and cold. And I look and I find here, roughly around the same time we saw icebox, the 20s and the 50s, refrigerators also in use, and that means that Williams could have chosen either one. Why is this important? Well, it tells us two things about the poem and the poet. First of all, by introducing icebox at the end of the first stanza, we already have a sense of the sensation of cold. And that's the very last image that the speaker gives us in the poem. You can just imagine a hot day where the speaker comes in and just wants something refreshing and cold and finds these plums. And so the most emphasized sensation in the poem, even more than the sweetness, is the cold. Second, knowing that Williams chose colloquial diction and also concrete diction helps us locate him in the Imagist movement. The Imagist movement is an early 20th century poetic movement where poets were much more interested in concrete imagery, they were much more interested in colloquial diction, and they were avoiding the more traditional poetic diction and meter. We'll study meter later this term. But for now, I'd like you to go to Moodle and look at the Poetry Foundation's page on Imagism just to get a better sense of that movement. It's very important and very influential on later poets. And also there's a link to Williams reading this poem, and I'd like you to listen to that as well.